right, greetings from the Dark Continent. Here, welcome to another episode of Stream of Consciousness, where I talk to experts in their fields, and in this time, specifically experts that can tell us a bit more about things that are relevant to the lockdown in South Africa, because I think a lot of people have a lot of questions regarding basic things like law, economic, psychology, and tonight, in keeping to that pattern, I'm talking to Ian Cameron of AfriForum to give us a bit more insight into the security aspect of the lockdown and what's been going on these past 40 days in South Africa on the ground. Welcome to the show, Ian. Ian, kan jy my hoor?
Ja, skus. How's that?
All right, a second. Ian, can you just tell us a little bit more about who you are and what your role in AfriForum is?
Yeah, so as you said, my name is Ian, and I'm the head of community safety at AfriForum. I think the main focus for us at AfriForum in terms of community safety is to establish community safety structures on the ground. This wouldn't only include in rural areas, but also obviously urban areas. We've been doing this for approximately 5 to 6 years now. We've grown to about 153 community safety structures in the country. We've got more than 12,000 people involved that are registered and trained in some or another way. And it's really made a huge impact on ground level. Apart from that, we've grown to a point where we run AfriForum 911 as well, the reaction part, where we make sure that more than 42,000 members of AfriForum have access to a 24/7 emergency facilitation service. So if you would press your panic, whether it's crime related or emergency medical of some sort, then we'll be able to assist you, and we then facilitate the entire emergency as it goes. Apart from that, we also have a trauma unit also involved with community safety, and it kind of completes the circle. So where we try to be proactive in terms of community safety structures, and we try to grow the community safety networks on ground level in terms of volunteers that get involved. We also have to look after people who get hurt through violent crime, and the trauma unit gives us that opportunity to really spend time with people and make sure they come out all right on the other end. So whether it's in terms of counseling or cleaning up a violent crime scene or a very bloody crime scene, we get the opportunity to serve them in some way, and then also to take them through the court process. So that's more or less it. Obviously, there's a large part of the job that the team does in terms of cooperation and any form of communication, and rather relations with different law enforcement and also emergency agencies. Unfortunately, with South Africa being quite lacking in terms of capacity when it comes to law enforcement institutions, it obviously is a huge need that we need community safety structures. And that's why I'm sure we're going to talk about it later. We've got such a massive shortage of people, or rather neighborhood watchers and farm watchers being able to patrol at the moment because of our police minister, who has really just actually messed things up, when he wouldn't allow communities to patrol their areas.
And during this time, a lot of people's jobs have been affected. My job has to change to adapt to the changing circumstances. A lot of people had to adapt in terms of changing the way they work, or adapting to the new types of work that they have to do. So you working in security and with keeping people safe, how has your job changed during the lockdown? What major developments have you and your colleagues had to adapt to?
I think from our side, it's actually been a very positive change. First of all, it basically means you need to be more productive, and it means that you need to communicate better. So in terms of the internal aspect, it's better for us. I think the frustration rather lies in the external part, where you've got the Minister of Police saying that community safety structures can't function as they should. That being said, I think the lockdown period brings a set of worries on its own in terms of what the future might hold. I think we're in a very unsure time in the country, and I believe that we're going to face quite serious challenges when it comes to, for example, riots, or whether there will be a food shortage in different places throughout the country. So I think from our side, obviously that would have a huge influence on what we do, and in terms of violence or civil unrest, we're obviously concerned for what the future holds, because the current pattern of distress and worries that people on the ground are experiencing obviously indicates to us that we are going to face an increase in something like civil unrest in the near future. So the lockdown has had a positive internal impact, but obviously a lot of concerns being raised about what might lie in the future.
So you being head of community safety at AfriForum, you just mentioned riots and civil unrest. Is that something that you deal with, or something that you are trained to deal with, or is that outside of what you usually tackle?
I think it wasn't originally the main idea, but it's really become a major concern for the future. I think currently in South Africa, it's one of the major challenges that we face. I believe that the one major challenge that we face in terms of unrest is that a lot of people believe the police can police it right. They can arrest people or make sure that people are prosecuted until the problem is solved. Obviously, the prosecution side isn't with the police, but I mean they complete a certain part of the circle. But there's far more to it. I really think many different departments need to play their role to make sure that socioeconomic circumstances might change to a point where we wouldn't have as much violence as we're currently seeing. We are a very violent country, and the things I've just mentioned basically caused for a lot of people to need additional protection of some sort when it comes to violence in the areas, whether it's an increase in violent crime, whether you blame that increase on political changes, socioeconomic circumstances, or anything else. They needed an increase, and the public violence, or rather civil unrest side of it, increased so much in the past 3 to 4 years that we had no choice but to get more involved in that. So yes, I don't think it's a prime responsibility, but it definitely does play a role, at least in terms of being eyes and ears for the powers that be, and also the interaction with private security services and institutions that are responsible for protecting so many of these, these types, or rather, that are responsible for protecting entities that would be at risk during these, violent circumstances. So, for example, if you, in the current stage that we're in, we've seen quite a bit of looting in the Western Cape and parts of the Eastern Cape. So then a neighborhood watch would be a great body that would be able to be eyes and ears for the powers that be, whether it's for law enforcement or private security. It really can be a force multiplier for them to make sure that resources are spent properly. Properly might not be the right word, but wisely, and that we don't unnecessarily waste resources. We can then pinpoint our resources and manage them, the best way possible.
And we have a question here in the comments, something that we actually talked about in when we were talking just before the show. It's about those surfers that were arrested in Mozambique. So I'm just going to get that article on the screen. Let's see. I've got it open here. Okay. So as you can see, there are 2 men arrested in Mozambique as surfers demand to be allowed to surf again. And one of the questions here in the comments is, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I personally think it's ridiculous. The surfers there don't really have any risk towards anyone else in the public. Obviously, things like social distancing, and we know all of that. But I think there are more important issues to be worried about. We're now spending valuable police time on running after surfers and chasing after a surfer with a bicycle today, instead of being busy with policing places like the Cape Flats, where we could be making an impact in terms of gang violence, where hundreds of children have been shot dead over the past few years. And I mean, we can talk about something like farm attacks later. That's an issue completely on its own. But my point is just, I think a lot of the police members are being, well, some of them themselves, unfortunately, are being petty, but they're also being forced into this petty thing where you are now trying to over-regulate something. It's actually becoming a very petty process where people like like Bekitele are making sure that someone isn't allowed, or that people aren't allowed to buy cigarettes. It's just ridiculous. And when I see members in a once very proud blue uniform running after surfers, I can't help but shake my head, because I then wonder how many people were arrested for copper cable theft in the last month, or the violent robberies that we've seen in the last week, that have increased, or the hijackings, and so I can go on. There's so many examples. So in short, I think it's ridiculous, and I think we're wasting valuable police time and effort and taxpayers' money by chasing after surfers.
And now that you talk about the ridiculousness of that, and with real crimes needing actual attention, what has happened to crime levels during the lockdown? What we're hearing from the authorities is that they've decreased, and that the lockdown's actually helping with crime levels, but you are boots on the ground. So can you tell us a bit more? Is that true? Has crime decreased, or are we actually seeing increases in some sectors?
It really depends from place to place. I think the overall picture of severe violent crime and the frequency of violent crime has decreased in certain areas. But it would be irresponsible to only look at it as a once off. We really need to dig a little deeper. I think one of the major talking points that need to be considered by people when they think about something like crime stats during the lockdown would be, the let's call it a ban of alcohol during this time. So it has had a positive influence on certain things. So, for example, emergency units at hospital aren't flooded on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays by stab wounds, or victims of stabbings. And it's a fact that very often places where a lot of people get together and consume a large amount of alcohol, there is a reasonable chance for violence being there than when that person would have been home alone or just spending time with family without the alcohol. That being said, I'm not the advocate saying ban everything. What I'm saying is that it has had an impact on certain parts. I think the dangerous thing of that is to hear that someone like Bekitele would say that alcohol is the reason for violent crime in the country. Now, that is an absurd statement, because it's simply not true. Yes, in certain places, alcohol played a role in violent crime, but South Africa is a significant violent country with significantly violent people. And if we are going to generalize something like that, then we've really got a problem. I think someone like Taylor needs to do introspection, not only with himself, but also in his department, specifically in the ministerial office, to consider statistics properly and to look at other crime. Something like stock theft in certain areas has increased drastically, where you see large amounts of stock being slaughtered right there and then. Not only one or two, in some cases, yes, one or two, where you can see someone just took it for food, and I'm not justifying it, but it's usually the reason when only one thing was slaughtered right there. But where you see 15, 16, even up to 20 cattle being slaughtered, and the carcass is just being left there. And that type of thing has definitely severely increased in certain parts of the country. I think a lot of crime, and we're going to see an increase. We can already feel the increase over the past week. I think we're going to see a lot of crime, and I think a lot of politicians that are pro the ANC style lockdown are going to say it's because of hunger, or it's because of socioeconomic differences, and that's simply not true. I think a lot of criminals are going to use that as an easy excuse to just continue what they were doing before the lockdown. The lockdown has had an influence because it means that criminals weren't able to travel as easily as they were previously. But it definitely hasn't had the impact that they portray on a national level. We can already feel an increase. We can see something like hijackings, armed robberies increasing, and something like burglaries at houses has increased in a major way in several, especially rural towns, and I believe the more things are going to escalate throughout the lockdown in terms of people being hungry, more conflict in your poorer communities, the more crime will increase, and it has to circle out, or rather have a ripple effect on crime in other communities as well.
Hmm. And you mentioned stock theft there. Do you have any speculations on why this is increasing? What is making it easier for stock thieves to do their crime during this time?
Well, obviously the whole thing about neighborhood watches and farm watches being able to patrol has a major impact, because a lot of the crimes that are occurring, something like harvested, something that was harvested being stolen from a farm, could have been stopped by patrolling community members. So a lot of things, visible policing by community members plays a significant role in decreasing crimes, whether it's urban or rural, and therefore I believe stock theft in many areas will increase, because it's simply not possible for farmers to patrol the way that they were previously. Yes, they are patrolling on their farms as they are allowed to do, but it's very important that the roads between farms and the areas between farms can be patrolled as well, and that different types of operations, whether it's just for visibility's sake or otherwise, can be performed with the police on ground level. The interesting thing is what Tele is saying on a national level and what the police say on ground level are two different things. The police on ground level acknowledge that community structures are of crucial importance to them to make sure that they can do their jobs properly. And I can really tell you that there are several and many police officials on ground level that really are fantastic at the jobs that they do, and they do significant work with very little resources. But someone like Bekitele just simply destroys that, and I think he really destroys the morale on the ground as well with his very autocratic way of doing things. It's almost as though there's an arrogance when it comes to the way that he does things, and that I believe is very worrying, because the more he does that, the worse the morale, the more doors open for things like corruption on petty issues within the police, and the police already have those problems. Obviously, the other worry with the lockdown is more and more police stations are closing to be sanitized, as they say, and a lot of police members are testing positive for COVID-19. So I'm afraid if the police don't, up their game, we're really going to have a major shortage, or even larger shortage, of police in the country very shortly.
Hmm. And now that you mentioned the police stations that need to be sanitized, earlier this month, or no, actually the previous month, you and your colleagues handed out thousands of bottles of hand sanitizer to the South African Police Service. But it seems that from what I remember, that this gifted horse was looked in the mouth, and they said one of the higher ups rejected it and said they should not take your donation. Can you give us some more clarity on what happened there, and if anything has happened since?
Oh, of course. So I'm actually just laughing at the thought of it. It's very interesting that on ground level. Let me tell you this story first. So I spoke to a cop in Gauteng. I'm not going to say exactly where, because I think that'll be the end of his career, or the part that's left of it. And I spoke with him, and he said to me, for his entire unit of, let's say for the sake of this conversation, between 80 and 100 police members, he received 15 latex gloves. So not only would only 7 people get a set of gloves, one person would actually only get one glove. That's the way that the police have handed out PPE. That's how seriously it was taken in certain parts. Now, the interesting thing was, at that stage, the general that announced, or in Gauteng, sent out an instruction saying that people aren't allowed to accept any hand sanitizer or any form of PPE from AfriForum, and that the relevant channels weren't followed or protocol wasn't followed, was an absolute lie. AfriForum, completed all the registers they need to complete on ground level, as they've always done, as we've always done, and as other people have done. I mean, even political parties like the DA on ground level sourced hand sanitizer and gave it to the police in certain areas. So we know there's a shortage, and that was accepted. Why now, when AfriForum would give something, is there such a major problem? Now, the very funny thing about it was, when we visited some of the station, they actually showed us the hand sanitizer, or the hand sanitizer that they were given by the police, and it was basically watered down sunlight liquid in a 500 milliliter Coke bottle, and just with a normal lid over it, and they were expected to use that to keep themselves clean. And I really do feel sorry for those police members, because I can honestly tell you that the majority of places where we spend time with police on ground level, and I'm not saying this to sound just funny, they really are fantastic career officials, and there are still many of them left in the South African Police Service, and that's why it's such a tragedy to hear people like Bheki Cele say the things that he does, or do the things that he does. It really put shame to people who wear the uniform with pride up to today, and I think it makes it very difficult for people to do their jobs properly, because everything has been politicized to such a point where they can't even look after their hygiene on ground level. The interesting thing was, the day after, or actually the afternoon that we received this news, they closed the visible policing headquarters in Pretoria because too many people, or some members there, tested positive for COVID-19. I mean, that's the visible policing HQ for the entire country. So many very senior people sit there, and they are responsible for coordinating your whole visible policing component for the entire police service. And now suddenly they have to close for a while, sanitize the place, and go to self-isolation. It doesn't make sense. If we are going to go that far, with more police units in the country at the rate that we are now, we are not going to have police on ground level. Sorry, before I complete the point, it's important to understand that if we don't have members on ground level at police stations, we need to go and find members on division level and bring them down to stations. So now the infection just continues. What if the division members that come down to station level also become sick now? So it's a vicious circle, and it's just going to continue if they don't up their game.
Yes, no, very interesting, Ian. I'm just seeing here in the chat, Elsie Kirsch says, AfriForum is tops. Now, we might be tops, but I don't think you should come knocking to look for booze. We're not going to be able to help you there. But thank you for the compliment. Now, something that I've seen a lot of people ask on social media, especially when I said I was going to talk to you, many told me I need to ask you about this. And that is the matter of farm murders, because I know you and your colleagues I could almost say specialize in dealing with farm murders and helping and assisting people in that matter that have been affected, or people that are in dangerous situations. But now during the lockdown specifically, you said earlier that different sectors or different types of crime were decreased, some increased. But what has been the case with farm murders, and do you have any other information there to give us in that regard?
Yeah, of course. I think something very positive from the lockdown is the decrease in farm murders, and it's very, very clear. It really has decreased. I think the mistake we shouldn't make is to say that now that it's decreased, it's going to stay that way, and that's not just to be cynical. I think it's important to understand that the same gangs of criminals that are out there are still out there, and that they are going to continue with their onslaught when they get the opportunity to. Remember that farm attacks, in most cases, especially your larger groups that perform them, or rather, let's call them specialized gangs, for lack of better words, really do plan what they do very, very well. They make sure of how they're going to do it, how long they're going to be there, what they're going to look for, what they're going to take or not take, how they're going to hurt people, and the preparation in many cases is really of a military standard, a military precision when they perform these tasks. So it is a very serious thing. I think everyone knows it. I don't need to go into any detail. The point is just that we've seen a decrease, but that being said, in the past week, there's a definite increase again. So generally in the lockdown period, if you compare the statistics, I don't have all of them in front of me now, to last year, it's not even a quarter of the same amount that we had last year in the same time. But the interesting thing is now suddenly, especially now in the end of April, beginning of May, we've seen a sudden increase, and the violence is also something that is noticeable. I think the important thing to notice that the more communities are that are under pressure during the lockdown, the more the increase will be. And that is not necessarily because people are now hungry, now they're going to be violent. But as soon as you see those types of conflicts arising, we very often see farm attacks or other violent crime increasing too. It's like land grabs. When we see a land grab in an area or other political unrest, we see a general increase in other violent crime as well. So they might use it as an opportunistic thing. But for now, it's something positive from the lockdown that we have seen less farm attacks.
That's very interesting. And something else that is now news very recently is what happened in Riots. So I'm just going to put that on the screen as well, and then we can discuss it. Let's just see. Here we go. All right. So here, state refuses to test residents of a quarantine camp. AfriForum arranged today for a team that offers medical services to visit the appalling quarantine camp close to Riots in order for the approximately 107 residents who haven't been tested for COVID-19 by the state to be tested at own cost. Did you have anything to do with that? Did you have any information there for us on what happened there?
Yeah, so it was actually one of our security teams. We work with other private security firms too that help the medical staff get there to do the test, and they were obviously denied access to the patients that needed to be tested. They were then tested by the state themselves today, or so we were told. And yeah, I think the worrying part of this is that they were allowed, or that the government held people, almost like a jail. I think the circumstances there are worse than some prisons in South Africa. They were held there, and regardless of the fact that they were held there, they had been one family had been in self-isolation for 5 weeks before that, and they were still held, and they weren't tested for almost 2 weeks. And I think that just goes to show the inhumane way in which the ANC government do things in many cases in South Africa, especially during the lockdown. The way that they have been received or treated, and the way that people in that province commented about it, specifically politicians from the ANC, made it seem okay, and that they said the circumstances there were very good. So I'm not a medical expert, but I know that, especially in terms of COVID-19 and the lockdown, there's nothing wrong with you being in self-isolation at your house. So why do you need to be in almost like to call it a jail-style quarantine, where you get looked after worse than some people look after animals?
And then also, something that I think is definitely of concern is the South African National Defence Force being deployed into the streets, and a lot of people, we're seeing a lot of videos come out of people being abused, a lot of abuse of power going on. But what are you, as someone that knows security and that knows what's going on, what are your thoughts on the South African army being deployed? And I've seen you've been vocal on Twitter about the idea of police reservists being used. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, of course. I think if let's go back to, let's just speak about the military side first.
Right.
First of all, the South African Defence Force, National Defence Force, has fantastic doctrine when it comes to public order, civil unrest, how to handle it, and so on. The problem is it's all on paper. I'm not convinced that the soldiers that have been deployed throughout the country are all trained in that, and that they would know how to handle a situation like that. Step number 2 with regards to that would be the fact that they have been deployed with assault rifles, with live ammunition. So what are they going to do if they were in a situation where people start throwing stones at them? Are they going to run away? Are they going to fire warning shots? Are they going to grab the policeman's shotgun and use that to shoot at the protester? I mean, the possibilities are endless. The point is just that I don't think it is the right move. I think it was possibly one of the only moves they could make, because the government hasn't made sure that we have the right backup or reserve, whether it's forces from military side or even from the police, in place when it comes to these types of situations. Less than 10 years ago, South Africa had more than 60,000 active police reservists. We now have less than 6,000. That would have been a phenomenal force multiplier at a far lower cost than the military. Now, in 2003, the commandos were disbanded. So I'm still on the military side before I get to the police. The commandos were disbanded, and when it was disbanded by Jackie Selebi, the then National Commissioner, and Thabo Mbeki, the then President of the Republic of South Africa, everyone was told that there would be a replacement, a proper replacement for the commandos, and that people didn't need to worry. That didn't happen. The training for reservists slowly but surely declined or deteriorated to the point where now, for several years, reservists haven't been trained properly throughout the country. In fact, there are several stations where there aren't any reservists left, and even if reservists were there or wanted to work, there aren't enough vehicles for them to work outside. They don't have firearms, and often ammunition or even firearms go missing. So the reservists don't have access to what they need. We then also had the challenge throughout the Soccer World Cup time period, and now I'm over to the police side, where when Bheki Cele was the National Commissioner of Police, allowed for many reservists to come in with the thought that they would get paid for working overtime. And that has happened several times, or that problem. Now, the point of a true reservist, I'm not talking about the ones that ask for money, is that a reservist does it for the sake of it, for the love of proper police work. And if we were able to now have more than 60,000 reservists that are well trained, that have good experience, and to on a rotation schedule put them out on the streets, we wouldn't need such a big military deployment in the country, because then we would have people that are trained in several different disciplines. The other thing is the reservists that come from up to 20 years ago and that have worked for up to 20 years or even longer are often trained in other specialist tasks, whether it's public order type of work, whether it's investigation work. It doesn't matter. The point is just that they are better trained. So often you would have reservists that are far better trained and are far more knowledgeable than some of the permanent members. And therefore, it would be a huge force multiplier for the police and for the South African government to have used. The other part, when we go back to the military, is that, remember, the picture that was portrayed by the South African government when the military was deployed was one of a mass deployment, that we have tens of thousands of soldiers out on the streets. They only deployed 3,000 soldiers, more or less. Those 3,000 soldiers couldn't even all be transported by official government vehicles. In many cases, other vehicles had to be used, whether they hired them or received them from somewhere else. The logistics were absolute chaos. And this isn't just me speculating. This is what people inside the military that work with it have told us, that we discuss these things with on a weekly basis. And so the South African Defence Force, the National Defence Force, have really been stretched with a deployment of only 3,000 soldiers. I don't know how they are going to build the capacity to deploy more than 70,000 soldiers. In the last few weeks, we have done relief work when it comes to food parcel delivery in parts of Pretoria West. We've spent time at cancer hospices delivering PPE, whether it's from hand sanitizer to other items. And in most of the cases, close or inside township areas, and then also in poorer other communities, we haven't seen any form of military activity. So, in fact, police activity was quite limited. So I really think they are stretched very far. Remember that at any given stage, there are only approximately 30,000 police officials out on the streets in the entire country. That's per shift throughout the country. So it would be impossible for 30,000 police members, if everyone shows up for work and some of them aren't sick from COVID-19, to police properly with an extra 3,000 troops on the ground from the South African National Defence Force. It just is not a viable option, or it shouldn't be a viable option. I think the government have been found lacking in this department, and I believe that they really have been caught with their pants on their knees.
Mm. And now that you're talking about being stretched thin and only 3,000 troops being deployed, where do you think these troops are being deployed and why? Or where are they being utilized?
The majority that we know of have been deployed to township areas, and that have also been deployed to the major roadblocks, provincial roadblocks, and some of the urban areas. I'm really talking city CBDs where they might face challenges with people that don't adhere to regulations, and people who who simply disobey the law, and also obviously it really could help a lot that they could assist with fighting crime. They can assist with raids and so on. Remember, in this case, the military is a support function for the South African police service. The police service still play the leading role in the entire operation. So it really can help in terms of that. But still, 3,000 troops when it comes to some of the townships in South Africa is a major problem. I also believe, and I might be, criticized for saying so, especially from the ANC side, is that they know that the major challenges in terms of people going hungry and the poor suffering are going to be in the very overcrowded communities where they have already deployed the military. And therefore, I think that's why they know the crisis that is coming in terms of just people going hungry, famine, is going to be very big, and it is going to be a major challenge. I still say, and obviously it's speculation at this stage, that I really think, and it's disastrous or very sad to say, that more people will die from hunger in South Africa in the coming months and from COVID-19. And it's thanks to the way the lockdown is being managed by the government.
Mm. And Ian, here's a question for you. Elsie Kirsch asks, is it true that you need a permit to hand out food parcels to poor people?
Elsie's putting me on the spot. If it were up to me, I think people need to be able to eat. So you should be able to give people food. Let's start this way, just on ground level. If Elsie was to go to Pick n Pay tomorrow or to any other supermarket, and she were to be on her way home, and she notices someone next to the road that seems hungry, and she were to give them something, and I'm not thinking about the safety aspects of it now, then I don't see that being a crime. There's no way that something can be enforced that you can't give someone that's hungry a bread or a bottle of milk or whatever it might be. Unfortunately, when it comes to the proper distribution of food parcels on a larger scale, especially, you do need a permit. But I don't think the permit is specifically because you need one for food. It's also that you adhere to the general regulations, that you can be identified as someone that is performing some form of an essential service. So it's important, if people would like to get involved in something like that, there are several organizations, but something or a group like Helping Hands or Solidarity Helping Hands really does make a massive difference in feeding thousands of people on a daily basis. And that's where you can get involved in an official capacity. That way you can make sure that you don't put your foot in it when it comes to regulations or a permit or something like that. And also remember, the lockdown's not going to last forever. That doesn't mean you need to just not do anything now, but we are going to get to a stage where you will be able to assist more people more easily. The challenge is still that, and I've really noticed it. We did a mass distribution project today with some fresh produce that we distributed to several old age homes and frail care units throughout the city of Pretoria, and it was quite alarming to see the amount of people out on the streets, the amount of cars, and the way that it's increased in only a week's time. And there's no way that all of those people are stage 4 essential services or even stage 5 essential services. It just cannot be. The increase is drastic. So it's important that we all remember. I'm not saying Elsie didn't do this. I'm just saying it's important that everyone remembers that the virus is still there. So even if lockdown regulations are loosened up a little bit, we need to make sure that we look after ourselves the best we possibly can in terms of hygiene, personal hygiene, and with other people, make sure that we don't get infected by the virus.
Mm. And here's another question from Christine Pretorius, who asks, did Helping Hands not also have a problem handing out food parcels? So maybe just to add to that question, have you encountered any problems where government or police or someone has been an obstacle in you handing out parcels or doing your job?
No, in fact, they've been fantastic. Everywhere we've had contact, and I speak on behalf of the people in Helping Hands that I've had contact with. We've only actually received compliments. We haven't had any challenges. I know there was a screenshot from a Facebook post going viral about a squatter camp in the Bonaccord area just north of Pretoria, close to Hammanskraal, where someone was stopped and 200 food parcels were taken by police, and there's no evidence to support that. We have tried everything to get more information. It just simply doesn't exist. We haven't been able to track down anyone. No one in the area knows, and we've got hundreds of members in that area that are involved with food parcel distribution, and they haven't faced any challenges. So unfortunately, I believe that is simply fake news, and I think a lot of people are spreading these things because it's a panicky type of time. People are stressed, they are worried about what the future holds, and then unfortunately people are more susceptible when it comes to something like that. They believe what they see because of the circumstances that we find ourselves in, and because of the ridiculous statements that government makes when it comes to race-based relief, like the tourism minister. That obviously creates for more worry. But no, we haven't had any challenges. In fact, the opposite. We really haven't faced any problems. It's only been welcomed, and police and military alike on ground level have actually only been helpful. And I hope it stays that way.
But then also, you mentioned neighborhood watches earlier. Where does that stand at the moment in terms of getting neighborhood watches back online and getting people back to doing that and keeping people safe? What is AfriForum's community safety's role in getting neighborhood watches back, and what's the situation currently?
So we've communicated with the Minister of Police with about two things. First of all, obviously neighborhood watches, farm watches, plot watches, and then also the second part was the Firearm Amnesty, which is a discussion that can take hours. But thus far, we haven't actually heard much. We're in consultations later this week to decide on further steps and what they should be. But for now, I think in terms of our community safety structures and other types of branches in AfriForum or of AfriForum in the country are all involved in an official capacity when it comes to food parcel distribution. So it's a phenomenal network of people. The neighborhood watches, farm watches, and plot watches have grown so much that we really have a significant network on ground level that can, within the framework of the current regulations and legislation, perform distribution duties. So it really has assisted us in fulfilling other places or other aspects where we were in need.
And before I move on, I would just like to take an opportunity, a quick break, to thank everyone that is watching, everyone that's tuned in. Thank you. We have a record number of live watches. It's very, very encouraging. So people seem to be very interested in terms of the security aspects of the lockdown. And because of that, also anyone that's watching live, if you have questions for Ian regarding security and what he does, you can put it in the chat, and I will see if I can get to them. And you can also help out the channel by leaving a like on the video, and also subscribing if you are unknown and don't know about the channel and like what you're seeing here. And then something that I wanted to talk about as well, you just mentioned it, is the Firearm Amnesty. And I know you said we can do an entire episode on its own about this, but can you give us a short summary of where we're currently standing there, what the situation is, and maybe just give a little bit of context on what's going on there for people that might completely be unaware?
So I think everyone knows about the amnesty side, but or that we are in an amnesty period. But obviously, the lockdown has had a major influence on this. several challenges. First of all, there was no comment from the Minister of Police when it comes to amnesty, what people should do, how are they going to renew licenses, how should they approach the police during the lockdown, all of those types of things. And then several of the designated firearm officers at stations that aren't working at the moment because of contamination or other reasons. They just simply don't show up. And we've had several complaints regarding this. And therefore, we then asked the Minister of Police to extend the amnesty period. And he then indicated to us in a letter to us that that would mean that they need to approach the cabinet, or rather parliament, where such a decision needs to be made, and obviously that's not necessarily possible during the lockdown. Now, I think he's picking for the sideline, because currently the supposed command council of the president are making incredibly irresponsible decisions with certain things, and something like this, they're not able to step in and make sure that the right decisions are made. So it makes it very difficult for firearm owners, responsible firearm owners in the country. Obviously, we're going to carry on with the process to see how we can have the amnesty period extended. I know there are several organizations doing the same thing.
And then also, I think something that relates to, private firearms is your relationship, and you mentioned it earlier, your relationship to the private security sector, and how are they being affected in this time? I think you qualify as private security, but I know South Africa is one of the countries with the largest private security force in the world. So do you have any insight for us in terms of how that sector has been influenced during this time, and how your AfriForum's community safety's relationship is with other private security companies?
Yeah, I think it's been very good. I think the fact that the neighborhood watches have grown originally might have seemed like a form of a threat to security companies on ground level, but the responsibility of a neighborhood watch was simply not that. We didn't want to take over anyone else's mandate or responsibility, simply to be eyes and ears and to increase visibility. So the cooperation have been fantastic, and it's just increased over the years. Private security is a huge force multiplier in South Africa, and I've heard many stories of people saying that they are absolutely involved in crime, and we can say that about anyone in South Africa. I mean, the allegation goes both ways. They've said it about the police. We know there are corrupt police officials. We know there are corrupt security officials and military officials, and we can go through the whole list. The point is just that there are fantastic security institutions, and we always speak about the golden triangle of community safety in South Africa, or rather just in general. And the one part of the triangle would be the police and law enforcement agencies. The other part would be private security, but the foundation would be community safety structures. Without cooperating community safety structure, with private security and the police, it simply cannot work. It's a recipe for disaster. We need to make sure that cooperation is on such a high standard, or of such a high standard, that we simply have no choice but to decrease crime in those areas. I find it questionable when people allow local politics to get in the way of combating crime, because it shows me that egos are more important than the combating of crime. And unfortunately, that's happened quite a bit, where bodies created by the police and within legislation to combat crime, or to assist with combating crime, like community policing forums, have started to be used or started being used as political platforms to influence politics on the ground, and that's unnecessary. I think we need to make sure that we don't bring politics into crime, and we need to make sure that, or rather into combating crime, and we need to make sure that we assist where we can to fast track any form of cooperation with institutions that can assist in fighting crime.
I think that that type of cooperation that you're describing is definitely a very important aspect of what you do, and something that I think will benefit the larger society around us. Just a quick question, I think it's for me. Let me just put it on screen. Sideline Opinions ask, where does the Solidarity Crisis Fund stand at the moment? Well, I checked today actually, and it stands at 9 million rand that has been raised through donations for, and not to be confused with the government solidarity fund. This is the Solidariteit Beweging noodfonds of crisisfonds. And this is specifically to help people in need without the racial dimension that the government gives it. So here you have an excellent example of grassroots coming together and raising funds. We have raised over 9 million rand. I've given my own contribution. I hope everyone else also, if they have anything to spare, can donate to this great cause. I will put a link to that in the description. So if you're not watching this live, you're watching this later, you can go click on the link and go support that excellent cause. And then to move on to something that I also wanted to discuss with you, Ian, is that did we miss anything in regards to what you've done during the lockdown? We've talked about the citrus that you handed out today. We've talked about Dal. We've talked about the hand sanitizer. Any other initiatives that we haven't mentioned?
I think that's the major thing. I think the fantastic way that Solidarity has described the handing out of food parcels to people who need them most was that they described it as handing out hope. And I think that's what we're responsible for at the moment, is to give people hope. I don't think everyone realizes how serious the deterioration on ground level has been. The amount of people that are in need at the moment has really increased sevenfold in a very, very short time. And I think it's going to get far worse. So it's really a great opportunity for people from the outside to get involved, and it's a great opportunity for us as a team in terms of community safety to expand our logistics network in a way that can now make an impact apart from community safety, and that's what we've done. So just in terms of the amount of food that has been distributed, last week we handled a food parcel donation that was worth just over 1 million rand. So I don't know if people always realize how much food actually you would have in front of you with that amount of money spent. But to give you an idea, it was about 2,000 food parcels that are each worth 1,000 rand. So it was a pretty remarkable amount of food. We moved 120 tons of food in one day, and just this morning we moved another 10 tons of citrus fruit that we then distributed to the elderly and needy in the Pretoria region. And this is what we're doing nationwide at the moment. We have a task team nationally that can assist with coordinating logistics throughout the country. And that is in cooperation with SAI as well from the agricultural side, and then also obviously Solidarity Helping Hand, not the one at Clicks, as you said correctly earlier. And yeah, it really has worked well. I believe that this capacity or this role that we have is going to have to be developed to a point where we can assist on a semi-permanent basis. The reason I say semi-permanent is we don't really know what the future holds, but we know that things are going to get worse, unfortunately, and we need to start preparing for that. And I think that in itself gives people hope. So everyone's not going to lose, but everyone can play a role in improving the circumstances of people that really need assistance on ground level.
Right. And before I continue, I'm just going to put the Solidarity Fund, or not the government Solidarity Fund, but the Solidariteit Beweging crisisfonds. I'm going to put the details on the screen for anyone that is interested in assisting there. So just give me 1 second. Go. All right. So as you can see there, 9 million rand already raised. And then here at the bottom are the many ways that you can donate. So there's an English version of this website as well, I think. And here are the details that you can use to contribute to this cause. I think it's an excellent way to give back to the community. And when you were talking now about creating hope and giving hope to people, just from a personal perspective, not specifically from an AfriForum perspective, but how do you think can people give back to their communities during this time, and then the time afterwards when we are going to be sitting with the problems that have been caused by the lockdown? How can the normal average person give back to their community in the best way they can?
I think the first thing is obviously if you can't get out and you don't know where to give, get involved in something like solidarity. I think so much is being done to help, and it would be fantastic to enlarge the entire network. We need as much support as possible, and it's important to remember that this isn't just a once-off where we can give a little bit of something and then the problem is solved. We really have to look at long-term solutions. So the more people who get involved, the better. But I think go and also investigate the local networks that you can get involved in, whether it's through churches or other charity organizations. See how you can get involved. There are so many. I think the important thing to consider is to make sure that they aren't just simply, different, let's rather say, they aren't just simply handed out to random people. And it's not to be inconsiderate, but it's important that there's a process being followed to make sure you can build almost a relationship with those people into the future to make sure you get them back on their feet if they were going to go through a difficult time. Otherwise, you're basically just sticking a plaster on a small cut, and it's not healing the wound. And that's what we would like to do. It's not always ideal. It's not always possible. But I think that's the long-term vision, is that we can actually stop the problems that we've already noticed.
I see here, just maybe for clarity, can you just quickly tell people what is SAI? Because you did an initiative today with them, just so people know.
Yeah, so SAI is quite a young organization. It's a Southern African Agriculture Initiative, or Suider-Afrika Agri-Initiatief in Afrikaans, and they are basically a network of family farmers. And I think there was a huge need in South Africa for an organization like that. The fantastic thing about SAI is that they aren't involved in politics, and they're not there to impress anyone. They're simply there for the normal family farmer on the ground. And that's certainly what's impressed me about them. And when we started with this project, they were the first ones to say, but hey, what difference can we make? How can we get fresh produce to people on the ground to make sure that they get healthy food? We don't always realize it, but we need to also see, and it's not, as I said earlier, everything's not always possible, but we need to see how we can get healthy food to people to make sure that they get the nutrition that they need in this time that we're in. It's quite simple. If people aren't eating healthy food, we can't expect them to stay healthy. And SAI has played a major role in that, in a lot of the donations that we've received from excess commodities that were produced on farms that we were now able to distribute amongst communities who need them.
And now that it's also on a community safety level, how can people get involved with the neighborhood watches that you do, and with AfriForum the AfriForum Community Safety Department?
I think there are two ways. I think the first one is go to AfriForum's website, and you can just contact us through the website, and we can, tell you how it works to establish a network in your area, whether it's a neighborhood watch, farm watch, or plot watch. And remember all the training that you get as an advantage. We've got a whole training department that really trains literally thousands of people on an annual basis. And then also you can send an email to veiligheid in Afrikaans at afriforum.co.za. But I think the easiest way is just to go through the website, and then we can stay in contact. And if people also need assistance with establishing something, and they might face challenges with the police, we can assist them in that conversation too, and we would gladly do.
And so there is a specific section for you on the AfriForum website that people can visit for all this information, or to inquire about it.
That's correct. Yes, that's correct.
Excellent. I'll put a link to the AfriForum website as well in the description for anyone listening after the live broadcast. And then we've reached the end of the show, Ian, and I would just like to give you the opportunity for some final thoughts on the lockdown and your job during it, and maybe some thoughts for the future.
I think, first of all, thanks a lot, and thanks for having a chat. From our side, we would just like to encourage people to get involved in any way they can to assist people in need at the moment. From a community safety side, obviously, the more people are involved, the better. It's important that people get involved instead of just complaining. A lot of times, I think people have lost hope in the country. And it's important, especially in a time like this, that we are seen as a beacon of hope, and that we use the opportunity to share a message of hope with people around us. And we really do have an opportunity right now. And it starts with something small, like donating, a little bit of food to your closest storage facility of Helping Hand, and from there we can distribute it to people who need it most. So little things like that really can make a huge impact. And if you can't afford that, try to share the message, try to tell people about where they can donate and how they can donate, how they can get involved, so that we can enlarge this network to a place where we really can get to more people quicker, because it's very difficult. We really would like to help everyone, but you simply can't. And we need to hang in there during this time. We also need to know that the lockdown is going to come to an end. It's just a question.
All right. Thank you very much, Ian, for taking time out of your busy day to come talk to us and inform the audience about the security aspects to the lockdown, and answer all the many questions that people had and the questions that I had. I've only had the live chat's just been full of compliments of people finding the chat interesting, supporting AfriForum, people asking for the link on how they can become members of AfriForum, and how people can help you guys out there at community safety. So thank you very much. I think this was an excellent, informative discussion, and I'll definitely have you on in the future so we can talk about what happens in the meantime until then.
Great stuff. Thanks, Adam. Have a good one.
All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in. You can leave a like to support the show. You can also subscribe if you want to. And I'll see you on the next one. On Thursday, I'm talking to Odin Moja, a computer scientist, about how his field can be used in terms of combating the virus. I'll see you then live. Cheers, guys. Have a good one. Stay safe, and remember to support the people in your community, especially the ones that are the most vulnerable. All right. Cheers, guys. Have a good one.